Is former U.S. President Joe Biden craftier than most people will give him credit for? Watch the rest of this video and let me know what you think. But first, go to Blackjack American's full video here for full context. It's a great video, but if you're crunched for time, skip over to about minute 4 to 4:10, where he starts reading from this Newsweek report that reports that the May 2024 report from the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, or SIGAR, found that since the Taliban's August 2021 return to power, around 10.9 million in American dollars aid had made its way back into the Taliban's pocket. And I assure you that SIGAR's report for that is a conservative number because they're using hard transactional data. They're not speculating on anything. They're using actual transactional data. Now what I'm about to read to you comes from the book The Operators by Michael Hastings. It was a New York Times bestseller, and it inspired the movie War Machine. War Machine is a Netflix movie that starred Brad Pitt as General McChrystal. And this screenshot comes from my Kindle for that book, highlighted there. Biden hadn't wanted to put more ground troops into the country, preferring to draw down to a much smaller number of U.S. forces who would focus exclusively on a counterterrorism mission. And that was during a first meeting between Biden and McChrystal in early 2011, I believe, shortly after they sacked Osama bin Laden, supposedly. And to be clear, in the Netflix movie War Machine, Brad Pitt plays a general named Glenn McMahon, whose character is heavily based off of McChrystal. He's not playing the actual McChrystal. The next page I had highlighted comes from a meeting that Biden had with Petraeus. In January, Vice President Biden travels to Afghanistan and meets with Petraeus. It's a little uncomfortable with those two, says a White House official. Petraeus views him as the competition. During one of his meetings, Biden listens to Petraeus' reports on progress. Biden sees the larger game ahead. The military is making its case for why it needs to stay longer, testing out the arguments they'll make to avoid the planned drawdown in July 2011. He could tell they were going to try to stay as long as possible, says a White House official. At another stop along the trip, an American civilian talked to Biden about a well they were building. Why do they need a well, Biden says, sensing mission creep. Now follow along carefully with me here. Over the next few months, Biden quietly presses the President, Obama, to change the mission in Afghanistan to get as far as possible away from the decade-long nation-building commitment that Petraeus wants and to the counterterrorism proposal he'd advocated for 2 years earlier. White House officials start to make the case the surge worked. Let's declare victory and go home. And here's the biggest part of my theory as to why I think Biden is so crafty and closeted smart. I think he wanted to get completely out of Afghanistan way back then. Of course, that makes the White House story under Biden that the withdrawal was all Trump's fault, a bunch of bullshit. But I think it's pretty clear that he wanted to get completely out of Afghanistan way back then and make it just special forces counterterrorism missions. And I think it's because he knew that the country was crawling with Air Force Office of Special Investigations, or AFOSI, Navy Criminal Investigation Services, or NCIS, and Army Criminal Investigation Division, or Army CID, and the Office of Inspector General, or OEG. Because now we're starting to see the big picture and the pieces of the puzzle, and we're able to put it together when we see other articles like White House wants Ukraine Inspector General out of the defense bill. And even more recently, we see that Zelensky has reportedly stated that Ukraine has actually received less than half of the billions of dollars that were approved by America to be sent to Ukraine. Where's it at? Well, I know from being the law enforcement liaison for a bank for over 3 straight years that the Office of Inspector General calls for our SAR, suspicious activity reporting, transactional supporting documents, because they're quite frequently working big waste, fraud, and abuse cases even in Afghanistan. But if we can pull all of that out of Afghanistan and shift it over to the Ukraine, and yes, the Department of State and USAID had OIGs, but they were not focused on U.S. funding to Ukraine. So if we had another military Office of Inspector General that was focused on waste, fraud, and abuse and other funding irregularities and digging into SARS? Are you picking up what I'm putting down here? Because Biden wanted us out almost completely out of Afghanistan. And we know what kind of OIG reporting was going on there. And it still took the OIG up till May of 2024 to figure out that the Taliban had been receiving these millions of dollars that I'm telling you is a conservative estimate. But we also know that it's reported that billions of dollars are going to Ukraine, and we don't know what kind of oversight there is. And as far as the U.S. aid side of the house goes, well, the Trump administration is trying very strenuously to completely do away with that. Well, gee, I wonder why. And we know that the State Department, the CIA, and other high-level U.S. officials have been basically engineering the Russia-Ukraine conflict along with NATO for years. We know that Russian officials have told U.S. and other officials, if you do this, we will consider it a red line and a potential cause for us to have to go in with military intervention. They knew what was going on for years. And it's been years as that money has shifted from global war on terrorism in Afghanistan to supporting Ukraine. And I guarantee you, I'm looking at documents now that are indicating that the United Nations has potentially been planning massive scale reconstruction in Gaza for years before the October 7th attack into Israel. So I can guarantee you, probably by the end of 2025, we're going to see billions of dollars of international system humanitarian and reconstruction aid also go into Gaza for complete reconstruction of the whole Gaza Strip. And there's also going to be really fat private military contracts needed for UXO disposal, for the disposal of all of the unexploded ordnance out there.